My name is Akbar Hussain. I'm the General Counsel and co-founder of TerraPay. We are a proud licensee of Vikas's, so I'll have to mind my P's and Q's on this, but we are very proud and happy to be a licensee of the FSC. And what I believe, what gets me out of bed to do FinTech is the endless promise of it. And the fact that we're entering the golden age where the regulatory agenda and the technological capabilities, we're entering that golden triangle of where things are possible. And that to me is very exciting.
So my next question I'm going to push across to Akbar, if that's okay. Looking from the outside, why did TerraPay choose Mauritius for some of your operations? How does that work with the regulatory landscape?
That's a good question, Chris. I mean, we operate in a lot of jurisdictions, but we came to Mauritius very early in our trajectory. And in plain answer to your question, in 2 words, it's a term that we use a lot at TerraPay. It's called the regulatory dividend, which is we don't see regulatory aspects as something to be welded on after the product is built. It's baked into the mix. It's at the molecular level of the mix, and we want it to be in a jurisdiction where that would be, it would be receptive to that kind of ideas. And so we're looking for a jurisdiction which would be have a good mix of a very high rule of law, to use the macro term, the World Bank term, of course, and have a very high reputation, and also have a highly technocratic regulator, and also have good professionals on the ground, such as Arvind, and indeed I'd like to give a shout out to the Sanne team with whom we've partnered from inception, and who've sort of held our hand and guided us every step of the way. And so we've been very pleased with that. We knew that going in. And as we know, as Migs can probably attest to, there is no license. There is no capital L license. It really depends from block to block, country to country, model to model. And so it's very important to be able to have that conversation upfront as early as possible, with as much nuance as possible, because very often you have to take out nuance to make it fit into a box which someone has. Which is not a win-win for anyone, right? So for us, TerraPay, for example, is a B2B digital first model. And we were able to have a conversation with the FSC, and they listened very carefully, gave very thoughtful feedback, and we were able to fit very neatly into a licensing regime, which is set up just for this kind of model, as opposed to trying to fit into some kind of other model. And I found that to be an excellent sign of what was to come, which is a very proactive, open door regulator. That's very important to us, and also the ability to project that regulatory dividend regionally. We are in the business of financial inclusion at scale. For us, I would echo what Vikas said about the treaty network, the regulatory network, the interaction between regulators. For us, it's not just a nice to have; it's actually a must have, which is why we're so happy about the FATF pronouncement. We think that's very well deserved. I know it took a lot of hard work, and we're very pleased, like I said, to be a licensee of the FSC. And I think there's a true thirst for leadership and looking to Mauritius to be a leader and a guide. And I think the blueprint fits very neatly into that, and the time is ripe for that, from my somewhat narrow perspective on things.
So we've been looking specifically at the Mauritian African connection, and FinTech for Good is a major theme across a lot of the global FinTech hubs, and understanding how FinTech can actually facilitate financial inclusion. There are still tens of millions of people in Africa that don't have access to traditional banking, and we've seen FinTechs really start to challenge that traditional banking model and access to financial services. Akbar, I'd like to just touch on this with you, and how you're seeing the Mauritian ecosystem maybe help, and how what your view is really across that financial inclusion landscape.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I mean, I think for us, we're in this golden window of where the cost of computing has come down, and the regulatory appetite for financial inclusion is very, very palpable. So if we were having this conversation in 2012, I would submit it's too early. And I would hope that if we were having this conversation in 2032, it will have been solved at some scale, at some level. Perhaps not by TerraPay, perhaps not. I don't know what shape it'll take. And that's sort of the exciting part here is building that and being part of that. And I think we've all heard that cynical joke where the last truly useful financial innovation was the ATM, the cash machine, which came out in like 72 or whatever. I think that the time for those jokes is over. And I think though that cynical mindset must give way to a brave new world where we understand that the next 100 million people who come on board to the financial world may not transact like the people on this panel or the people listening. They may have very different patterns of behavior, but they're no less deserving of, I'll use a big word, dignity, the dignity afforded by having a credit card in your pocket or a driver's license or a passport or access to health insurance or a loan to build your business. These things, we have assumed a very traditional / banking architecture and a very Western / middle class approach to everything that's tacked onto that architecture. And so for us, what we're doing in Mauritius and from Mauritius, because we're projecting a lot of this business to Africa, like sort of what Migs was alluding to, it allows us to do that, and allows us to do that at scale and thereby aggressively drive down the cost. One of our investors is the IFC, the World Bank Group, and that was an explicit promise that they extracted from. I mean, not extracted. I mean, we were happy to give it, but we were driving down the cost of that and driving up financial inclusion. And indeed, we have to give them an annual report card on sustainable development goals. How many, what is the metric for gender? Because a dollar placed into the hands of a woman is generally worth, I think, 6 or 7. I mean, it's not a sexist comment. It truly is an empirical fact that I'm stating. The knock-on effect is so much greater if you target it that way. And so, like I said, it's exciting. And this is something that I would like to be a small part of. I think all of us want to be a small part of, add our little brick to the larger cathedral of an infrastructure which is going to truly service the next 100 million people. And if we can do that, then I think we'll have made good use of all the privileges that we've been handed over the course of our education and professional lives. And I think that would be a good legacy to be part of. So perhaps that's too overblown an answer. I'm happy to dive down if that's what's required, Chris. But that's something I feel quite passionate about.
I'm assuming Mauritius is the facilitator of that as well. So across to Akbar, if you could have your input, please.
Yeah, from a practitioner's perspective, financial inclusion does not mean, in TerraPay's worldview, a compromise in standards, right? It means a retooling, and that's what I mean about technology and cloud computing allowing that now, a retooling of the protocols for transaction monitoring and KYC and anti-money laundering and counterterrorism. To the contrary, rather than compromising those standards, we are retooling the technology to allow for a real-time, almost a streaming of data, agnostic to ticket size. And I think that is what's going to happen next. A lot of it is, machine learning has a huge component. We've made a huge investment in this so that every time a human being touches a file or an alert, they add true value to it. Otherwise, it's expensive and unscalable. So I believe that the time is right for that. And again, our regulator has been very, very receptive to the way that we share the data with them. It's a non-traditional model in as much as we don't touch cash, we're B2B, The ticket size, it could be $30, for example, could be a transaction. Now, how do you report that? How do you check? Is something that is a pattern that's suspicious when you're paying to a mobile wallet also suspicious if you're paying to a bank account? Is it suspicious if it's coming from an app versus someone walking in with money to a high street kebab shop? Those sorts of eccentricities have to be baked into it, and now we have the means to do that. So it was a problem which was previously unsolvable, and we believe that now it is.
And thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for convening us.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.